So you saw the, oh crap, I'm on my desk right now. So you saw the title and you were like, okay, so she's gonna talk about Huck Finn, and I am, so we'll do that. You know, and noteworthy, I have a very, very old copy of the book. It came from my grandma's house, and I picked it up, and that's where I first decided to read the book. And yes, the back is torn, just to pretend that's not there. A very old copy, of course, and then actually I have another copy, Tom Sawyer, that she gave me, and I'm gonna be careful with them, I promise, don't worry. So I recently read this because I thought, you know, this would be a good time to read it. And I don't know why I'm being awkward. I'm not, it's not awkward. Well, I'd heard about Huck Finn before, but I didn't exactly know the story. In fact, I think I once thought that Huck Finn himself was the black character before I read Tom Sawyer a couple months ago. That's not very smart, but for some reason I feel like people get confused. Like, I've seen people, I don't know, I don't really think the characters are easy to confuse, but I guess some people have gotten confused about that, and it was like a popular Google search. Anyways, I don't know why, but anyways, I'm gonna talk about the book and my thoughts on it, and this is not a scripted video, but I am going to do some scripted videos later on. I'll talk about that at the end, and, you know, enjoy. So, I first picked up this book at my grandma's house, you know, and I'm so used, and it was very refreshing because I love things with good, like, morals and stuff, you know, aka anti-slavery, anti-racism moral, presented in a way where you see a lot of blatant racism and, you know, how people would have acted in the South at the time, and in very nice, authentic dialogue. Like, I do, although it is sometimes hard to read dialogue like this, like, I think the only other time I've really struggled reading dialogue was this book called Child of the Mountains, and then another book, A Clockwork Orange, which, you know, that dialogue is just kind of made up. But in this, it is very, like, it seems very authentic. I do like when people actually include the dialogue of the people at the time, although they do say some horrible racist things. That is sad. It is authentic to the time, and I think a lot of people that's something you must understand before you go in, otherwise you're going to be shocked at some of the things people say, and some of the ways, you know, if you're not used to hearing about stuff like this. That is kind of a warning, but, you know, some people may say, oh, you're being too this or that. I really don't care. So, like, anyways, I really liked this book. It was refreshing because I usually read stuff that is tonally dark. Like, I mean, I'm a dystopian and I'm a sci-fi fan, so I read a lot of tonally dark stuff. And Shakespeare as well. So this was kind of refreshing because it had a dark plot and kind of a dark theme, but at the same time, it presented it in, like, a nice, almost satirical manner, and I love the characters of Huck Finn and Jim. It's kind of wholesome. I love their friendship. It's awesome. Tom Sawyer acts like an idiot at the end of this, but alas, whatever. So, you know, spoilers and everything, obviously. So, the book revolves around, you know, the main character, Huck Finn, and his journey, kind of, it's almost kind of like most of it is his journey through learning that these people, like, I mean, people of different races, like, Jim is, you know, he's a person, and, you know, there's a point in the book where he says, you know, I'd rather go to hell. I will go to hell. I'm okay with him being set free. And if that means I'll go to hell, I don't care. I will. And I think that's really a very important part of the book, because you see, a lot of it has to do with kind of I feel like there's like a little bit of an anti-authority sort of thing, because, you know, Huck himself was a very anti-authority character because his father was basically abusive, or I think tried to kill him at one point. And, you know, he also wasn't used to the high class, you know, civilized society. So basically the civilized society is very, uncivilized, aka they treat people like animals, right? Like they sell people. And then even his father, the uncivilized society, is still pretty much racist, but just treats him like crap. So you think Huck, you know, is one that should rightfully not like authority, or, you know, the system or whatever, the machine, and so he basically wants to leave. Like, he has to escape from his dad at first, you know, from what I get from this. He gets on a raft, and, you know, long story short, and he goes to this island. He finds Jim, who realized that he was going to be sold down south and ran away because like he didn't want to get separated. Like that is horrible, like, you know. And so they kind of form this friendship. They float along the Mississippi together, which, you know, Mississippi is a river that I've heard about my whole life. You know, I live in the Midwest, so you hear about the Mississippi a lot, and I suppose it is in the South, but I always think, you know, whatever. And you know, they float along this river. They meet these really crooked guys who call themselves, and this part cracked me up. They call themselves the Duke and the King when they're absolutely nothing, and they just go around conning people out of their family money. It's really messed up. And then the king ends up selling Jim back into slavery, and that's at the point where, you know, Huck has that realization, like, oh my god, like, this isn't right. Like, I don't want my friend to be part of this. He wanted to escape, right? So, you know, he goes to these people's house. I think one of them is called Aunt Sally, and I can't remember the name of the other. I am so bad at remembering names of characters. I'm not even kidding. So they have Jim and in this like shack, which is, I picture it as a shack, but maybe it wasn't. I think it was a shack because, you know, bad living conditions, you know, which is sad. Tom Sawyer shows up, and you know, I really do like the character. I liked the character of Tom Sawyer and the adventures of Tom Sawyer, but in this book I really would like to slap him because he's like, what? Why was there a need for this? And I understand there is probably some sort of meaning from the actual book, but Tom literally is like, okay, I'll help, you know. And Huck, and see, here's one of the important things is that, you know, Huck is like, oh my gosh, Tom, you know, Huck I see Huck as kind of almost idolizing Tom because he's like, you know, raised in a normal house or more like upper class house, and you know, he seems more civilized to Huck, and Huck realizes that he's so surprised that a civilized kid would help him help Jim get to freedom. And so, you know, that's very important to think about, because you think, this poor kid has thought his entire life that it is a godly thing to treat other people like animals. Like, that's horrible, you know? He's said this his whole life, and he said, I'd rather go to hell than to basically and that's not what he actually said, but he said something along the lines of, I would rather go to hell than let Jim still be enslaved. And so he thinks that Tom Sawyer, the civilized character that he has always for some goddamn reason looked up to, would never, but he does help him. But the thing about this is, it turns out that Tom knew all along that that Jim's owner had died and was basically he was free. Like, Jim was free all along, but Tom knew this, but he still told Huck that he would help him escape. And then he went through this convoluted crap when Huck was just like, well, why don't we just get him out? And Tom's like, no, you got to do it the right way. But of course Huck goes along with this because he doesn't really know any other way. And, you know, it feels like after all the growth in the book, they've reverted back to basically torturing this poor man. And, you know, I feel like that's kind of a testimony to, you know, no matter how much you grow, you can always fall back into old habits. But he does, you know, they go through this whole convoluted plan that freaking Tom Sawyer sets up, and they help him to escape even though he was already legally free. Why couldn't we have brought this up? Why? It's awkward. And so they help him escape. Tom, I think, gets shot in the leg. You know, the jig is up basically, and, you know, Jim's free. And then, you know, Huck finds out that Jim was free all along, and he was like, what, why? And I feel like this has to do, I feel like the end of the book has to do with both reverting, sometimes it's so easy to revert back to old ways, and also, like, the fact that, you know, Tom really thought he could look up to this one figure of authority in his life, when really he couldn't. Tom Sawyer just likes doing crap for the fun of it, and it's weird and odd because, you know, Huck very much kind of idolizes him as a friend. He's like, wow, like, this guy, oh, old Tom Sawyer would know what to do, you know, the whole time. And I think that's also another, I mean, other than the fact that, you know, the big plot of slavery, I think that has to, another thing would be, I'm so sorry. Another thing would be that not idolizing authority or looking up to authority, because authority isn't always right. And I love books like that, because this whole system that went on for 400 years, it wasn't right. It wasn't in any singular way okay to treat a human like that. And I think Huck realizes it because he truly becomes friends with Jim. And he also realizes that Tom Sawyer is acting like an idiot. Well, the book ends, I guess, on a kind of, oh, just looking forward to the future, onward, where am I gonna go now kind of ways, like a lot of books do. And I really enjoyed it. I would recommend it. It was definitely an important novel, I think. Also, sorry, I'm getting a Tennessee. Okay. I am getting, what did I say I was doing? I'm confused. Oh yes, something else that's important to discuss. The use of that word. Yes, it is definitely in this particular copy of the book, because, like, yes, and apparently it's used almost like 200 and something times in the novel. Now, a lot of people might take this at face value and say, oh, that's bad. Like, you know, well, how is that such an important piece of literature? Well, I'd say one, it's using the dialogue of the people at the time and showing how badly, you know, these people were treated. Like, Black people were treated because of this system that had gone on for so long, so freaking long, and everyone was so used to it. I almost saw them being treated like animals throughout the book, and even Huck himself said stuff like that because he was basically socially conditioned by these civilized people to. So, you know, question authority, of course, which I think is one of my favorite themes in book. I've read so many books that have to do with question authority. I'm gonna do a video about that soon. So I think that's interesting. And I do think this is very important as a reminder of our past. This, you know, this country and everything. It's a good reminder of our past and historical times, and that, you know, the past wasn't always pretty. Like we like to look at the past and be like, oh, I wish I could be in like the, I mean, as much as I love, for example, 60s music, I don't really think I would completely want to live in the 60s. I mean, maybe that's kind of a stretch because it wouldn't be as bad as it would have been like in the 1800s, but it's still kind of an iffy time period, you know what I mean? And you gotta imagine not everyone would want to. So, you know, I think it's an important glimpse into the past. I don't think it should really be censored. I understand if you have like a little kid reading it, and you have to at least say beforehand, yeah, this isn't something you can throw around. Just because they say it in the book is not something you can throw around. That would be understandable, but otherwise, if you're a grown adult, I think you should be able to handle some dark subjects and some dark themes. And I really think it really pushes the point even more, because if they had just said slave, that would have just been like, that would have not been as hard-hitting and sad to read, you know? And yeah, it would be missing a lot of the point if that part just didn't exist, because it's really showing the actual way they treated these people. And yeah, so yeah, I definitely recommend this book. I would say the dialogue is a little hard to read sometimes, especially if you're not from the South, if you're a Midwesterner like me, you know, like, you know, I was trying to do my Bob Dylan voice. Because that's like the classic example of a Midwestern accent right there. But I definitely would recommend, and you know, there were certain parts of the book that I did have to read out loud to myself, because I had to get into character so I could understand what the frick they were saying. But I do think that's actually kind of a good thing, because it authentically captures the way people spoke. So I assume he was trying to capture reality, right? But I would definitely recommend, you know, go check it out if you haven't, especially in this time with everything. You know, maybe don't mess up a like 70-year-old book like I have. Yeah, like get a new copy. and beware that there is some dark subject in, but it's also very well written, and there's, you know, a good character arc. It's really nice for once to see something through the eyes of a child, just because I find that kind of narrative interesting, because they really just take things at face value, and they, you know, and then when someone so young gets to like think about their surroundings, finally they're like, oh, well, maybe this person wasn't always right. You know, Huck Finn is a perfect character for that, and so definitely recommend. Also, like, some latter thoughts. If you think of American stereotype, this book is kind of it, or at least the peak characters in it, like Huck or Tom or even Jim, are kind of like almost stereotypes of Southerners, or like how they were back in the day. And you know, that's the point. But you know, people always think of that American, like that American boy, you know, Southerner, you know, that kind of thing. I feel like that is kind of a stereotype almost. Like if America has a stereotype, it's that Southern charm kind of thing. You know what I mean? If you've read it. But definitely recommend. If you've already read it, tell me what you thought. Tell me if you disagree with me, please. I stutter a lot, so, you know, if that's annoying, tell me. Also, yeah, just tell me if you like it. Tell me if you're planning on reading it. Also, I probably just spoiled everything if you're planning on reading it. So, peace. I plan on doing a video about dystopian and books like this later on, because I've written an essay that I would like to read about it. So, yeah, peace. So if that's something you're interested, stick around, subscribe, like, peace. I'm actually done now.